Hi, today in this session, I discuss the general characteristics of Age of Pope. Age of Pope in English literature is an important age. It is remarkable for development of great classical literature. It is remarkable for the development of great prose. It's remarkable for the development of great satires, wonderful poetry. So for all these reasons, Age of Pope or Age of Alexander Pope is very, very important. I'm going to discuss some important aspects of this age. What is Age of Pope actually? Age of Pope is also called neoclassical period. Normally, we discuss that first half of 18th century is known as Age of Pope, and second half of 18th century is also known as Age of Dr. Johnson. As far as neoclassical period is concerned, of course, it is a kind of a trend we can see in the history of English literature, as it is already discussed. A period between 1660 to 1798, largely dominated by Neoclassicism. It may include writers like Alexander Pope, John Dryden in Restoration period. We already discussed John Dryden, Jonathan Swift, Josiah Wedgwood. They found inspiration in classical period. So this neoclassical literature particularly is characterized by order, accuracy, structure. They stick to form. They stick to a particular structure, and that's why we call them classics. Okay. So Age of Pope, you can also see a kind of a direct opposition to what we have seen in Renaissance attitudes, where man was basically seen as good, but neoclassical writers portrayed man as inherently flawed, faulty. There is no immediate glorification of human body, what we see in Renaissance literature, whether it is Fairy Queen or wonderful comedies and tragedies of Shakespeare, or wonderful love literature that we see in Renaissance. This kind of over enthusiasm is not seen in neoclassical period. They emphasized restraint, they exercised self-control and common sense. Common sense prevail. This kind of opposition we could see even in metaphysical school of poetry that we studied already. Neoclassical literature was written between, of course, 1660 to 1798. Of course, it includes three important periods, like Restoration period, which is already discussed in the classroom, Age of Dryden, we call it. The Augustan period, now we are studying Augustan period or Age of Pope, King Augustus. We remember him later. And Age of Dr. Johnson. I was talking about Age of Dr. Johnson. Of course, some people argue that this neoclassical period happened between 1680 to 1750 only. That's not a very important thing. Let's focus much on the trends. So this is something about what is Age of Pope, neoclassicism, and all. Let us discuss some important, aspects, socio-political aspects of 18th century, which were responsible for development of different kind of literature in age of Pope. So what are the general characteristics? The general characteristics of this period are many. I discuss very few important ones which directly influenced the writers and the writings of the time. The first one we notice is that the rise of political parties, the two important political parties in England, Whigs and Tories. Whig and Tory, of course, we discussed this during Restoration period itself. The parties were, in fact, established in 17th century itself, and they become very, very significant in 18th century. Whigs Whigs are supporters of democratic government, and Tories are supporters of divine right theory. So these are the things the Tories always supported: royal right, divine right theory, and they respected a kind of a monarchy, constitutional monarchy. Whereas Whigs are liberals. Now they wanted more powers for Parliament of England. So obviously, these two political parties were so strong that writers were divided, people were divided, clubs and coffee houses were divided. So there were Tory writers, Whig writers writing against Tories, Tory writer writing against Whigs. So a kind of a hiring also took place. Political parties made use of writers, and this kind of affiliation to political parties was common. So that's one thing you can see in age of Pope. And the second important thing is clubs and coffee houses. Clubs and coffee houses are a very interesting thing that we can study in history of the 17th and 18th century. Very interesting thing is that a lot of literary discussions were happening in clubs and coffee houses. We talk about upper class literature in Restoration period. But in 18th century, major discussions, of course, coffee houses also served tea and hot chocolate as well, light meal. They are not just for going, eating and drinking coffee. People used to sit, discuss. As I told you, even there were Whig clubs, Tory clubs, and they were also affiliated to different political parties. So writers used to sit and discuss prose, poetry, essay, drama, politics, society, sitting in clubs. And for your kind information, you can also know that it's called Spectator Club. You know, Spectator papers were published. And we come to know that so much of writings come from different clubs and coffee houses. They were published in magazines and periodicals from time to time. So they become intellectual centers. ಬುದ್ಧಿವಂತರು ಅಂತೇನು ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ಬುದ್ಧಿಜೀವಿಗಳು ಅಂತೇನು ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, thinkers ಅಂತೇನು ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. They all used to sit in clubs and coffee houses. Okay. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಧಾರವಾಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂಥದ್ದೊಂದು ಇತಿಹಾಸ ಇದೆ. ಎಲ್ಲಿಯ ಕ್ಯಾಂಟೀನ್ ಇರಬಹುದು, ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ಅಟ್ಟ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬಹುದು. ದೇ ಯೂಸ್ ಮನೋಹರ ಗ್ರಂಥಮಾಲ ಅವರೆಲ್ಲ ದೇ ಯೂಸ್ ಟು ಡಿಸ್ಕಸ್ ಲಾಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರ್. It is not just sitting for evening tea. It is sitting for some serious discussion. So another thing is new publishing houses. It's a very interesting thing that in 18th century, you can see the development of new publishing houses in 18th century. And obviously, you can also see that there is a decline of drama. First decline of drama is seen in the beginning of 17th century. Post-Shakespearean drama, on the decline ಓದ್ತೀವಿ ನಾವು. Drama was revived in 1660 with the coming of Charles II. That's where we see the what we see in restoration comedy of manners. But saturation ಆಯ್ತಲ್ಲ, drama goers were less, and almost drama lost its significance in 18th century. So obviously it gave a rise to reading public. So novel became important, prose became important, novel became a pocket theater. We'll discuss it. It helped the growth of publishing houses because many rise. Its rise of middle class education is also responsible for development of reading public. Some of the persons like Edmund Corll, Jacob Tonson, and Danton became forerunners in publishing houses. Okay. One more important character is rise of middle class and new morality. There was a rise of middle class. Middle class, I hope you understand, middle class played a very important role. Whenever we are talking about middle class, we talk about morality. Morality is equal to middle class. Even today, we are now talking about middle class morality. ನೀತಿ ಅಥವಾ ನೈತಿಕತೆ ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದು ಯಾವುದೋ ಒಂದು ಶಿಷ್ಟಾಚಾರ ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಮೊದಲ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಬೇಸಿಕ್ ನೀಡ್ಸ್ ಫುಲ್ಫಿಲ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೇಕು. ಬೇಸಿಕ್ ನೀಡ್ಸ್ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಫುಡ್, ಶೆಲ್ಟರ್, ಕ್ಲೋತಿಂಗ್. ಮಿಡಲ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ನವರಿಗೆ ದೀಸ್ ಥಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಅಶ್ಯೂರ್ಡ್ because it is a working class and a regular salary, regular income. It is only after you are satisfied with the basic needs, you think about morality, you think about variety of things, religion, this, that. So you can see a new kind of morality in this particular age. So people were tired of licentiousness of restoration period. We are talking about cuckolded husbands. We are talking about unfaithful wives. We are talking about upper class, degenerated upper class, which is presented in restoration comedy of manners and other literature. That they wanted to establish a new order in the society, and that's why the middle class played a major role in new morality in English, in England. Okay, this is about rise of middle class. So far we have discussed the general characteristics of age of Pope. Now we take up literary characteristics of the age. What are the literary characteristics of the age? ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯಿಕವಾಗಿ ಬದಲಾವಣೆ ಆಗಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ಕಾರಣಗಳು ಇದ್ದು. There are so many reasons for the development of literature in 18th century. And let's discuss these literary characteristics of age of Pope. Number one, it is an age of prose and reason. It's primarily an age of prose and reason. Prose dominated this century. There are many reasons why prose was very important. We discussed about political parties, pamphleteering. We discussed about clubs and coffeehouses. We discussed about a variety of aspects, but that led to the rise of prose. So Matthew Arnold called this age as an age of prose and reason. Prose. Primarily, this age was prosaic. A lot of essays were written during this time. Political pamphleteering was written during this time. Great prose satires were written during this time. Criticism. ಒಂದು ಗದ್ಯ ಕೇಂದ್ರಿತವಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂತಹ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯದ ಒಂದು ಯುಗ ಅಂತಂತಂದ್ರೆ T.S. Eliot ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ, ಒಂದು ಭಾಷೆ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಶ್ರೀಮಂತ ಆಗ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಅದನ್ನು ನೋಡಬೇಕಾಗಿದ್ದು ನೀವು ಗದ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ. If at all a particular language is rich, test its prose. Prose exploits the whole of language, not poetry ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ T.S. Eliot ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸಿಕ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಎಸ್ಸೆ ಒಳಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಾನೆ. ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರೋಸ್ ಡಾಮಿನೇಟ್ ಆಗಿರ್ತದೋ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಷೆ ಬೆಳೀತೈತಿ. 18th ಸೆಂಚುರಿ ಒಳಗೆ ಭಾಷೆ ಬೆಳೆಯಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಕಾರಣಗಳಿದ್ದು. ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಜಾನ್ಸನ್ ಅಂತವರು ಡಿಕ್ಷನರಿ ಬರೆದ್ರ. ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಸಿ ದ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಡಿಕ್ಷನರಿ ಇನ್ 18th century. ಇನ್ನು ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಯಾರೆಕ್ಟರಿಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂತಂದ್ರ ಇಟ್ ವಾಸ್ ಎನ್ ಏಜ್ ಆಫ್ ಸೆಟೈರ್ಸ್. ಸೆಟೈರ್ಸ್ ಅಂತಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ವ್ಯಂಗ್ಯ ಕೇಂದ್ರಿತವಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂತಹ, ಅಣಕ ಕೇಂದ್ರಿತವಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂತಹ ಏನು ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ರಿಡಿಕ್ಯೂಲಿಂಗ್, ಮಾಕಿಂಗ್, ಜೈಬಿಂಗ್, ಕ್ರಿಟಿಸೈಸಿಂಗ್, ಸ್ಯಾಟಿರೈಸಿಂಗ್. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಪೊಲಿಟಿಕಲ್ ಪಾರ್ಟೀಸ್ ಇರ್ತದೆ. ವೇರ್ ವೇರ್ ಪೊಲಿಟಿಕಲ್ ಪಾರ್ಟೀಸ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅಪೋಸಿಷನ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಯು ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ರಿಟಿಸೈಸ್ ಪೀಪಲ್. You criticize one another, and criticism lead to satires actually. So satires were abundantly written during this time. But moreover, ಈ ಸಮಾಜದ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ಅನಿಷ್ಟಗಳನ್ನ ಫೋಕಸ್ ಮಾಡೋ ಸಲುವಾಗಿ ಇಂಥ ಒಂದು ಅಣಕ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯ ಅಥವಾ ಸಟೈರ್ ಹುಟ್ಟುಕೊಂತು. ಸೊ to criticize or satirize upper class and degenerated society. Prose and poetry of this period are mainly satirical. Prose ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಗಲಿವರ್ಸ್ ಟ್ರಾವೆಲ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಬ್ಯಾಟಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಬುಕ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಈ ಕಡೆ ಪೊಯೆಟ್ರಿ ರೇಪ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಲಾಕ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಸಿ ಆಲ್ ಆರ್ ಗ್ರೇಟ್ ಸಟೈರ್ಸ್. ಎಪಿಸಲ್ ಟು ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಆಲ್ಬರ್ಟ್ ನಾಟ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸಟೈರ್ಸ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಬರೆದ್ರು. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಲವ್ ಪೊಯಮ್ಸ್, ಈಗ ನೀವೇ ರೆನಾಸಾನ್ಸ್ ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರ್ ನೋಡ್ತಿರಲ್ಲ, ಇಟ್ಸ್ ನಾಟ್ fully a kind of celebrated or glorified literature. Okay, it is a classic age. ಇದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ ಬಿಗಿನಿಂಗ್ ನೊಳಗೆ. It's a classic age. 18th century is also called neoclassical period because love for classical was very much felt during this time. Neoclassical period, this Augustan period. So Greco-Roman influence is very much on these writers. It started with John Dryden actually. John Dryden wrote wonderful heroic couplet, heroic poems. And Alexander Pope was the master of versification. He was a great classicist. So you can see the revival of wonderful classical tradition during this time. So that's why it is also called classic age. Okay. So obviously what we see in this particular period is the development of classical literature. The next one is urban literature. The literature of this particular period is rather urban centric. That's what we call London literature sometime, because most of the writers were located in London. They wrote about London, on London people. Obviously, it's a refined, urban, artificial literature. Whether you can take it as a merit or demerit of the age, that can be discussed later. But it is superficial, it is urban, and focused much on the upper class society of 18th century. And it's also called Age of Enlightenment, which emphasized logic and reason. I was talking about Age of Prose. Age of Prose and reason means reason, tarka ant heltivi, logic. People were influenced by logic and reasoning. Tarkashastra ant ಓದ್ತೀವಿ ನಾವು, ಲಾಜಿಕ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಜನ ಲಾಜಿಕಲ್ ಥಿಂಕಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ರು, ತಾರ್ಕಿಕ ಚಿಂತನೆ. You can see this kind of development in this literature. It was preceded by Renaissance and followed by Romantic era. Renaissance ಮುಗಿದಿಂದ ಇದು reasoning ಶುರುವಾತು. Romantic ಶುರು ಆಗೋಕ ಮುಗಿತಿದ. The landmark publications of Enlightenment include Voltaire's ನಂತವ್ರು ಇಡೀ ನಾವೇನು we speak about Renaissance and Europe. At the same time we speak about Enlightenment and Europe. Age of Enlightenment ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. Voltaire ನಂತ ದೊಡ್ಡ philosophers letters on the English Dictionnaire philosophique ಅಂತ ಬರೀತಾನ. Hume ಅಂತ ಬರ್ತಾನ, Treatise on Human Nature. Montesquieu ಬರ್ತಾನ, The Spirit of Laws. Rousseau, Go Back to Nature. Social Contract, Man is born free but he is everywhere in chains. Wonderful ಮಾತುಗಳನ್ನ ಹೇಳಿದರು ಇವರೆಲ್ಲ. Voltaire, so they are all responsible for the French Revolution. So ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಮಹಾತ್ಮರು ಥಿಂಕರ್ಸ್ ಹುಟ್ಟಿದಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಏಜ್. So obviously this age of enlightenment also influenced the writing of literature. That's why age of Pope is mainly responsible for development of prose, development of periodicals, development of satires, and development of wonderful classical writing. So with this, I'm going to close today's talk, and we shall keep more for discussion. Thank you.